Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Special Education News and Noteworthy, the podcast where we break down the latest news impacting special education across the country and talk about what it means for students, families, educators, and advocates. I'm Paige Fitzgerald.
And I'm Kate McGaldy.
Before we jump in, if you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to follow us on Spotify. Following the show helps more families discover these conversations and ensures you never miss a new episode.
This week, we're discussing new data on inclusive classrooms, an investigation into special education evaluations in Atlanta, a report on preschool expulsions for children with disabilities, an update on Houston's ISD's special education restructuring, and criminal charges against a former Texas special education teacher. So let's get started.
Our first story comes from K to 12 Dive. A new report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office found that more students with disabilities are spending the majority of their school day in general education classrooms than they were a decade ago. Between the 2012 2013 and 2023 2024 school years, 42 states and the District of Columbia saw increases in the percentage of students receiving instruction alongside their peers without disabilities. The report also found that the overall number of students receiving special education services continues to grow, while many schools report staffing shortages that make it more challenging to provide services and supports needed for successful inclusion.
Yeah, so I mean, my first when I first read this, my first reaction was like, "Oh, this is great because we're moving towards, closer to what special education really wants, and is to have children with disabilities alongside of their peers whenever appropriate." However, I feel like I am also concerned that inclusion for many of these areas is more because of staffing shortages, and I think that we have to, no matter where you are in the country, I think the idea needs to really be honed in that inclusion is not like a specific location, it's a service delivery model. So like if a student could be part of a classroom, but if there's accommodations and modifications are not appropriate for that student, there's no point of that child being in that inclusion model. So I kind of feel like I'm like a roller coaster with this. Like I'm happy to hear the data, but I'm also like, oh, like where is there a red flag in many areas because of staffing shortages?
Right. Wondering, is it something that's being done right? Because in order for inclusion to work really well, you do need the right resources. You need staff that have the training so that they also have the buy-in to be supportive and understand how to support
Right.
the kiddos. So I get your lens of it of, is this inclusion because they're really excited about this and really making a push to include disabled children with their non-disabled peers? Is this a budget thing that inclusion rates have increased because the number of children receiving special education services increased? In the story, it does say that, I think it was saying like 40% of the students that
Mhm.
are in inclusion, like gen ed, co taught classrooms, things like that, are students with specific learning disabilities. Yeah. So I mean, all in all, this is definitely something that we're pushing for. When it's appropriate for children with disabilities to be in gen ed settings, they can really thrive when there
Of
are the
course.
correct supports and they are in the right training. So I think overall it's a positive story. And yeah, I'm sure there still needs to be extra training. And as we know from week to week, the funding is always an issue. So
Touche. Our second story comes from Atlanta News First. Atlanta's public schools is facing a state investigation after a former school psychologist alleged that an unqualified staff conducted psychological evaluations used to determine students' eligibility for special education services. The district disputes those allegations, and the investigation remains ongoing. The report also highlights a broader trend in Georgia where school employees, not just parents, are increasingly filing special education complaints. An internal district audit also identified concerns related to documentation, evaluation timelines, parental consent, and IEP procedures, though the district says that it has implemented significant improvements.
so this is an ongoing investigation. So obviously there isn't anything concrete of what did or did not happen. They're investigating it.
Sure.
I do think it's very interesting that there's been an increase in staff complaints. Um, and it seems like, just from what they were able to suss out so far, that there are a lot of red flags in the compliance. going on,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
something when compliance goes to the wayside, that's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Right, yeah. I correct me if I'm wrong, Paige, but wasn't the mom a psychologist herself that reported that filed this complaint? I believe she was.
I believe she was. I don't know if her child was in that district or another district, but yeah,
Okay. But
I think she was. I know that they had worked there for a decade. It said they'd worked there
yeah.
for like 10 plus years and possibly had retired and then filed a complaint. I can't remember 100%, but alarming, right? So it's not someone that's
Yeah.
new, it's someone that's saying, "Hey, I've been seeing some things that are just not okay." And it was saying that a parent had waited, got her child evaluated, they had qualified, and then they were contacted and said that those evaluations might now be void essentially because they weren't done by a qualified professional. And
Yeah.
like you were saying in our previous story, staffing shortages
Mhm.
uh, are a very real thing. And this is a case where, possibly, we don't know, right? The investigation's still open, but possibly this district was trying to get around some staffing
Totally.
shortages issues. And yeah.
And schools cannot simply assign whoever's available to conduct these assessments. Every single assessment it requires a specific professional. Psychologists are cognitive piece, special education teachers can do the cognitive piece of it. Um, Speech pathologists, communication, obviously. I mean, everybody has like their own area.
Mhm.
Sorry, I said special education teacher cognitive. I meant to say academic. Um, but every professional has its own area, and we really cannot, have wiggle room there because there is a shortage of teachers or shortage of staffing to conduct specific evaluation. So,
Yeah, and
um,
that's a
can't
part of your
compete.
background too, Kate, where you used
Yeah,
to be in that administrative side and having to make sure with the evaluations and the compliance and all that. So this is a big deal if they're
yeah.
getting flagged for
I
possibly not doing that.
Yeah. And I actually remember in my first teaching job, I did all the academic testing for the special education kiddos. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I never like knew any of this when I was in graduate school. And then when I later taught in a different district in a different state, like the school psychologist did all the testing, cognitive and academic testing. And now in my own kid's school, it's separated again. So, every school district does something different. But you
But
really
hopefully
have
they're
to
all
stay in
following
your
the law.
lane. Yeah, and they are all following the law. I've never seen anything other than that, but I would speak up if I determined that, you know, Kate McGalley is not gonna be doing a speech, language assessment on anybody because I don't have that qualification. So, just stay
Yeah.
in your lane and, you just don't assign people whoever is available because it just won't work, and it's gonna come back, but like you
Yeah.
said, it's an investigation that's ongoing, so we'll get the truth at some point.
Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. Okay, our third story comes from Disability Scoop. A new report from the Education Law Center, Pennsylvania, found that preschool students with disabilities are suspended, expelled, or informally pushed out of early childhood programs at dramatically higher rates than their non disabled peers. According to the report, preschoolers with disabilities are suspended or expelled at a rate 14.5 times higher than children without disabilities. Families interviewed described children being repeatedly sent home early or removed from preschool altogether because programs struggled to meet their needs. The report calls for stronger protections against preschool suspension and expulsion, as well as increased resources to better support young children with disabilities.
I don't know, this particular article, I don't know, really stung. We're
Mhm.
finding in conversations with family members, with friends, I don't know, I just across the board, I just feel like we know on one hand that early identification is so essential and it changes the trajectory of that particular child when interventions are implemented early on. But on a different side, I shouldn't even say the same side, we're struggling with identifying those kids in a private preschool or preschool program in general if they're not part of an early intervention type program. Like I think that there's such a need for um consultants of some sort to be able to go in and to educate and to give professional development opportunities to teachers and administrators of those programs to be able to look for red flags of things like this particular child. it shouldn't be how are we going to stop this behavior, but it should be like, why is this child exhibiting these types of behaviors? There's something that might be underlying here. And to expel a kid, it just really stung me big time.
Um, one of my kiddos is a COVID baby, and I remember at that time with daycares, with preschools, that staffing turnover and shortages was just, I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Hmm.
I would say more so than even elementary and, all those other grade levels of teacher shortages. There were huge shortages when we were in Connecticut for preschools. And
Hmm.
I specifically remember that the staff would change so much all the
Hmm.
time that some classrooms would close down because there wasn't enough staff. And my son, who at the time, he didn't have the language that his peers uh, had a conversation with someone who was very new and was like, "Okay, he bit someone and this needs to stop. I put him in timeout in a corner and he's not going to be able to come back." And I was like, "Cool, cool, cool. So what's your behavior handbook say about this in terms of behavior intervention?" She's like, "What?" And I was like, "Let me
Yeah.
talk to you." And had to actually go through and say, "You have a behavior intervention protocol, don't you, for behaviors? You can't
Hmm.
threaten to kick out my child just because he doesn't have the skills and the tools. Like this is a child with a disability. You're not going to treat him like that, and you're not going to put him in timeout." um,
Yeah.
he doesn't
Yep.
have so I 100% believe that that is still the case because I do think that there probably is still a high rate of turnover, and that being that there are many people in there that still need training on behavior interventions for kiddos that don't have the tools in their toolbox, language skills, emotional
Hmm.
regulation, sometimes even fine motor feeding skills. Someone in the story was saying that like her child essentially wouldn't be able to eat until the one-to-one that they had came in, because no one else was there to support him for that.
Hmm.
So yeah, it seems like it's still a big issue. I remember it being a big issue back then that I had to advocate for my own son for, to make sure
Yeah.
that he was being treated the right way. And yeah, I believe it. And they were saying in the story that they're really trying to lobby for making it, so that children aren't being, sent home and being expelled because these are our littlest learners and they deserve the opportunities for those early learning just like their peers do. And if that means more training, like you said, like more training for
Yeah.
staff, consulting with agencies that can actually help you integrate those children with higher needs into your program, then
Hmm.
so be it. But you can't just exclude them.
But also, Paige, like thinking about what you just said, it's awesome that, I mean, you knew that your child was struggling in different areas at the time. And you were able to push back to the administrator of that school and say, "Sure, like, cool, like, what does that look like in your protocol?"
Hmm.
But for parents that don't have that knowledge or that, the things that they've shared with their pediatrician are not coming up as red flags yet, the school is really the place where the red flags are probably going to be raised a lot earlier if a parent's not on board. And I think that we just have to really be knowledgeable about like what that looks like for once you're seeing those red flags in the classroom, like then what?
Hmm.
Where do the teachers or administrators turn to when this is not something that they expected of this child? What's a protocol for talking to the parent about it? What's a protocol with getting the pediatrician on board? Like there are just so many gray areas that I still feel like we have so much to learn specifically within the preschool programs. But I think the teachers um, the first people to really experience maybe like the socialization issues, like being able to compare one child to another,
Hmm.
academic wise. What does a typical peer in the classroom do compared to the other child? And when you're seeing that on a day to day basis, it's very different seeing that versus like being with your child one on one at home.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that there's so much to be learned, and hopefully consultants can have more of an input on that in that aspect. Okay. Our fourth story comes from Houston Public Media and is an update to a story that we've been following over the past several weeks. Parents in Houston ISD continue to challenge the district's plan to consolidate certain special education programs into designated campuses next school year. The restructuring remains under investigation by the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, with concerns that placement decisions may have been made through broad district policies rather than individualized IEP team decisions. Some parents recently reported receiving calls from the district indicating that their children may now remain at their current schools, while others continue to wait for answers as the federal investigation moves forward.
So this is a story that we did do some coverage on, I believe, a month or so ago because
Okay.
someone had leaked that this was a plan that that district was trying to go forward with. And naturally, parents had an uproar, right? That,
Mhm.
okay, we're
Mhm.
going to now make these campuses. And if you want those services for your child, they have to be at that campus. In this story, Karen Mayer Cunningham, someone that we've had the pleasure of going on her podcast in the past. She was doing, I believe, a protest and a speech outside of one of the school district locations and really trying to shine a light on it. And this is the way that you create impact and make sure that these things aren't being swept under the rug is that you keep, using your microphone, sharing your voice, and for the parents that are in Houston's district, keep telling them that this is not okay. The investigation is still ongoing. The fact that it was even open once again should tell you something. The fact that the district is now calling some of those parents and saying, just kidding, they can go back to their campus when school starts should also tell you something. Once again, I think this was something, like I said previously, that probably sounded really good on paper, but when you don't have a diversity of voices in the room at the decision-making table, then this is what happens, right? Decisions are made and it turns out to not be what people wanted that actually have skin in the game.
Yeah, um, nicely said, but it's also, these decisions need to be based on individuals' needs, and many, if not all, of the children that they discussed in this article, all were children that were on the spectrum, and not all, but many children on the spectrum had difficulty with transition. So to kind of like pull the rug from somebody and say like, "Oh, by the way, your kid's gonna be moving to another school," like, that has so much more implications on just, like, moving a kid to another program, another school. It's like the transitions, the comfortability, the routine, the predictability, like, so much of that is impacted, and,
Yeah,
I'm glad that they reopened it and they're still investigating because I still think that there's a lot of unanswered questions here.
yeah. And I mean, when I spoke to Michael Gilberg the other week in his interview for our 100 Voices on Special Education, he said something about, for district officials, especially in big districts, your child is a number, right? They're not
Yeah.
looking at it as like, how is this emotionally going to affect the kiddos? Who for them, this is their neighborhood school, this is their comfort zone. Maybe they are not a person that can adapt very easily to new environments. They're not looking at it like that. They're thinking, okay, we'll consolidate. We're going to move group A over here to group B and it's going to be stream. They're not thinking of the
No.
actual, the human piece of this, right? Like you're dealing with kids and parents and school teachers. Yeah, they're not thinking of that emotionality.
Well, it's not, and it's not just kids, it's, yes, it's the parents too.
Yeah.
Thinking about if your child was in a specific school, in a specific program, and you just felt like such a supported circle around you, and then you are uprooted and having to go to another school, you're changing too. It's like the comfortability of what was predictable for you is being changed. So I think it's, I don't know, just change across the board is not good. So
Agreed.
they did take the emotions out of it.
All right, our final story this week comes from KFOX 14, CBS 4 in El Paso, Texas. A former special education teacher has been indicted on 16 felony counts of injury to a child, following allegations that she physically abused several nonverbal students with disabilities in her classroom. A former paraprofessional also faces criminal charges connected to the case. The indictment follows a civil lawsuit alleging that the district failed to properly screen employees and did not adequately respond to concerns raised by parents about unexplained injuries and behavioral changes in students before the alleged abuse came to light. Both the criminal case and civil lawsuit remain ongoing.
I hate hearing stories like this, but it's like a pattern. I feel like we have at least one of these every week, if not every other week, of some sort. And you know, it's a reminder that creating safe school environments is essential. But what does that really look like? I think it has to do with strong supervision, um, teacher training, obviously, like incredible background checks. And for those kiddos who really have difficulty with communicating and language development, I think that there needs to be some sort of, monitor of some sort in the classrooms to make sure that these kiddos are safe.
I mean, for me, I just think of it as another one of, like, cameras in the classrooms, right?
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
pushing it from in some states, it's already a thing for self-contained classrooms. Um, Cameras in the classrooms, though, I mean, these are some of our most vulnerable
Vulnerable people. Yeah.
citizens are in these classrooms, and we're hoping that the people taking care of them, or charged with taking care of them, I should say, are doing right by them, and I think that it's just another example of how early on could this have been caught if there were cameras in that classroom? Um, and just also something for parents of trust your instinct. If
Yeah.
something feels wrong, you know your child better than everyone, right? The cliche saying, but it's true. You do. You know your child better than everyone. You're seeing behavior changes all of a sudden, and your child can't verbalize what is going on. If you're finding unexpected marks and bruises, and the things that they are saying for explanations are not making sense, those dots are not connecting, you have
Mhm.
every right to keep pushing and make sure that you're finding out if your child is safe at school.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, those are this week's top stories in special education. If you'd like to read more about any of the stories that we discussed today, be sure to check out this week's edition of the Special Education News and Noteworthy newsletter, where we've linked each of the original articles.
And if you're finding these conversations helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you follow the podcast on Spotify. It helps us reach more families, educators, and advocates who are navigating special education every day.
Thanks so much for spending part of your week with us. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay vocal, and take care of yourself.
Bye, everyone.